Hey, Changemaker! Welcome to Learning for Good, the only podcast that teaches nonprofit leaders how to leverage training to drive performance, improve capacity, and fuel their mission impact. Do you ever feel like your nonprofit is growing, but your people just aren't keeping up? Or like you're fixing the same problems over and over? Do you wonder how to build confident, capable staff who know how to lead, not just execute? If we haven't met yet, I'm Heather, and I know how hard it can feel to get people to do what's expected of them. Trust me, I have 3 kids. I've tried telling people what to do and how. I've tried the traditional training approaches, and I realized that just doesn't work. And that's when I started researching what does work. Now, I help mission-driven leaders use learning to drive performance, build capacity, and make change that lasts. And I'm sharing it all on this podcast. So block your calendar, turn off your Teams or Slack chat, and let's dive in. It's Learning for Good.
You know how sometimes you can look across the room at your best friend and know immediately what they're thinking? There's this clear connection between you. No words needed. It's so fun when that happens. But sometimes we assume we know what another person is thinking, and we're wrong. They aren't our best friends. We don't have years or decades of experience with them. But we jumped to an assumption about what they thought or what they wanted, and we acted on it. And then it doesn't turn out the way we expected. I don't want that to be you and the executive leaders you are working with. I don't want us to assume we know what they want. I want us to ask. I want us to dive into deep conversation about it. And I want us to walk away feeling like we are so clear on their expectations. To kickstart us on this journey, I've asked nonprofit executive Danika Mitcham to join me on the podcast today. While Danika can't speak for every nonprofit executive, I am thrilled to have this conversation with her, and I hope it gets your wheels turning about questions you can ask your executive team too. Let's dive in. It's Learning for Good. Grounded in both strategy and empathy, Danika Mitcham excels at identifying what it takes to move from today's challenges to tomorrow's solutions. With a keen ability to see how people, systems, and ideas interrelate, she bridges the gap between bold aspirations and practical execution. She is known for building mission-driven teams with complementary strengths, guiding them to turn bold ideas into real impact for the children, communities, and donors they serve. Danika, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's really good to be here.
I am excited about our conversation. I don't think we've done a conversation like this one yet, but now my wheels are turning and I'm like, how many of these can we do to really get a good look inside of what executives want from learning and development? Before we dive into our conversation, though, I have one question that I ask all of our guests, and that is really just tell us about your career journey. How did you get where you are today, and why is this work important to you?
Very good. I'm really excited to be here. And I've been fortunate to spend much of my career in the nonprofit sector, learning from incredible colleagues and mentors along the way. But my first mentor was my father. He spent much of his career in academia and even served as dean of an adult and learning education program. And he taught me really early on to be a lifelong learner. And that's one of the most important things to commit to. And so that idea really has shaped up my approach to work and also leadership. So after several years early in my career in the for-profit world and higher education, I started out in nonprofit work through volunteer engagement and community programs. And I didn't really have a grand plan at the time. I just knew I wanted to help build things that mattered and serve children in poverty. And my first role was leading a volunteer program. And what I remember most is how much I learned from the people around me, whether it was the volunteers who sacrificed their time, not only for the mission they believed in, but to also coach some of us on staff, because we had great volunteers who were at the end of their career or in retirement, and they had such wisdom to impart, but also to the people that I worked with and all of my bosses along the way. That program ended up generating revenue, ever increasing each year, as well as we were able to increase our team's capacity by 60% without adding more staff. And this concept really shaped my approach to all of my roles following that, to always really engage with not only effectiveness, but efficiency so we can build our team's capabilities and capacity. And over time, I've been incredibly blessed to be at Compassion International and be able to grow and learn throughout the organization. Been here for 21 years, and I've had a chance to work on global transformations, support strategic planning, and then lead teams within the marketing and fundraising areas. And today I'm grateful that one of the teams I get to lead is an incredibly talented operational excellence team. And they include a marketing and fundraising organizational readiness group. And that they have training and learning development in their scope. And our focus is really on helping the organization build capabilities and culture that it needs to grow sustainably and stay mission driven.
I love that you knew right away what you wanted to do, or not exactly, right? Not the details, but you had this vision for where you wanted to go and how you wanted to serve in your life and just made it happen. I think that's so cool that something that you recognize early on has just been a through line in your career, especially since joining Compassion International. So today we're going to talk about what executives really want for learning and development. What are those expectations? What are those things that maybe we're assuming that might or might not be right? So from your perspective, from where you sit, how does training or learning and development connect to organizational strategy, outcomes, and mission impact? Big question, but what is the ultimate connection point for you in driving that organization forward?
Oh, it's incredibly critical. So learning and development is really critical to achieving an organization's strategy. As an executive, I'm consistently balancing the tension between delivering on this year's goals and outcomes and preparing the organization for where we need to be in 3 to 5 years. And that's what organizational readiness is all about, which encompasses training and change management and all of those things. And at a macro level, transformational changes are preparing for the future that require all of those things. And it even includes documentation of new processes, then training on those, then monitoring for adoption across the impacted areas. And then also at the individual level, people need professional development. They need that for their current roles because this world is ever changing. They need to stay modern with their capabilities, but individuals often want to be prepared for that next role that they want to serve in based on where the organization's going or simply for promotional opportunities. And so being really able to balance that tension of future and today is really critical. And the training teams and the learning and development teams are absolutely important in that space.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So I love, though, that you're bringing in the learning and development really has the ability to serve both the organization and the individual. We're looking at the strategy. We're looking at the future. We're trying to figure out what people are going to need to execute that strategy, that vision. But we're also looking at the individual there. I always say there's an organizational change typically happening when training is requested, and there's an individual change component to it. And so when we can marry the change management best practices and the individual behavior change principles with what we know about how adults learn, that's really where the magic happens for organization. So when maybe you're going through a change, an organizational change, you're looking at that 3 to 5 year vision, or maybe something else is happening in your organization, what is it that prompts you to invest in training for your teams?
Well, it's like you've said, I've really learned that when we invest in people, not just their skills, but their actual growth, we build organizations that last. And that growth is really important because that's more than training a task or training on a new system or user interface that they need to do, but how are they growing as an individual? How are they maturing as an individual? And incorporating all of that into our learning and development programs. Our knowledge and skills and abilities, they can become stale so quickly, given, again, the changing environment. So it's really critical that we invest in our teams and so that they can stay relevant for the organization, and then the organization stays relevant as well. So this past year, our training team or learning and development team really had the idea that we need to really help our staff understand, so how do they show up as partners? We're production, we're customer service. How do we show up in partnership with marketers and fundraisers as equals at the table to bring our knowledge and our skills and abilities to help make healthy decisions? And some of that learning is then, how do we interact in meetings? How do we share our ideas? How do we bring our subject matter expertise to the table that is in a meaningful way to create change? And so we did a series of lunch and learns, is what we call them, where people can come and learn about various skills and abilities. And it was fairly popular with the team. So that's a space where it's more about growth than necessarily a skill to train on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always, when I talk about my work, like I've done the functional training where it's something that's very specific to their job. It's a task. It's an action that they need to take in their role. And so we need to train them on how to take that action and prepare them to do that. And then on the other side, you have these, what people used to call soft skills. I don't think we use that term nearly as much now, but it's those skills that people need to do their job. It's not necessarily a specific function of their job, but emotional intelligence, EQ, is a great example of that, where it's this underlying kind of foundational skill that helps you do your job more effectively. And that's also super important to keep in mind as you're thinking through learning strategy and how you're going to invest in people over time. I appreciate you sharing that example in particular.
Do you wish you could connect with other nonprofit learning and development leaders? I know what it feels like to want someone to bounce ideas off of and to learn from, someone who really understands you and your work. Imagine if you could have a simple way to meet people in the field, ask questions, and share information. That's why I created the Nonprofit Learning and Development Collective, where nonprofit L&D, talent management, and DEI leaders can connect with each other quickly and easily in a virtual space. When you join this community, you will walk away with a new, diverse, and powerful network and a sounding board for your staff development needs. So if you're ready to exchange ideas and collaborate with your peers, come join the Nonprofit L&D Collective.
So a lot of times, right, in nonprofits, we're thinking about the needs of the organization. We're thinking about the needs of the people. We're thinking about the budget as well and changes there. So how do you balance those short-term budget pressures with long-term staff capacity building? Is there a tension there? And if so, how do you balance that?
There's absolutely a tension there. One, I think we have to recognize there's always people to serve. And in nonprofit, that's our goal, is to serve people. And that's a here and now need. But then again, there's that longevity. How do we create a sustainable organization so we can keep serving people and serve more and more people over time? It's really difficult. And I think it's about creating that balanced portfolio. So what percent needs to be long-term and what percent needs to be short-term? And a lot of that just depends on where your organization is. Are you needing to scale by a magnitude of 10x by a certain time because there's an urgency? Okay, that means you probably want to be more in that long-term investment. Are you on more of a steady growth path? And that's more in that short-term time frame. It's interesting because I advocated to pull my current division together because they were spread across various teams who didn't understand the value of investing in their capabilities, both short and long term. And when budget needs happen and they need to be managed or even reduced, professional development or training often is like the easiest cut to make. And for many of my people, it had been years since they had been engaged in anything other than the standard training for their job tasks. But what that yielded was a degradation in the service and capabilities that they could deliver. And their capabilities are really critical to the organization. It's customer service, experience, production. So when we choose short-term dollars over long-term investment, we're not just short-changing the individual, which is bad enough. That's not honoring the dignity of the individual, but you're shortchanging your ability to deliver on your missional outcomes long-term. You're shortchanging the sustainability and growth of your organization. So you really have to find that balance.
I appreciate that because I do think that the tension is real. And I think we can acknowledge that it's been a tough year this year for a lot of nonprofits in particular. And so budgets are probably top of mind for many of them. And like you said, training, any sort of people development can be an easier thing to cut. And that's understandable to an extent, right? But then what is the impact of that over time? And is it going to impact the services that you're able to provide, the programs, the support, because your staff are no longer able to perform at the highest level? So when you do invest in training, right, when you are figuring out the budget and saying we need to earmark money for training, what is the ROI that you expect? What are you looking for when you invest in training?
There are so many opportunities, and it really depends on the individual's role. So for instance, the example I just gave, we have a continuity product. So people give monthly over time. Well, if they have poor customer service, that means that they'll stop giving, which impacts revenue. So, or if they've decided to stop giving, but we have them talk to a customer service representative, they may be able to help them see the value of staying with us. So that's a really important training to invest in. So there are revenue ties, and I'm in marketing and fundraising, so that's my main space, but also improvements to improve outcomes that you desire for the people that you serve. So those are straightforward ones when it's really can tie easily to that. But I'm also looking for, are we able to improve our capabilities as an organization without having to hire externally or to hire contractors or new staff? And these often lead to revenue and outcomes, but I also think it's broader. For instance, is your digital team or your social media team staying up to date with all of the newly available ways to reach people who want to give to your cause? Or do we have to contract that out? And what's the cost benefit there? Are your customer service scores improving like we've been talking about? There's also employee engagement. Are you retaining staff? It's a lot harder to go out and hire somebody. It costs more to go find a new staff member, get them onboarded and trained up versus maintaining and retaining your staff. And I think so employee engagement is another one. And then finally, are we increasing capacity of the teams to take on more without overtaxing them? Are they learning new ways to improve what they do so that it takes less time or produces higher volumes for the same amount of effort? And I think that capability increase and the increase in capacity can really serve an organization, especially in tight budgetary times, versus thinking of professional development as something that is a nice to have. It's really a must have in those situations.
But it's so true. It's, as somebody who has sat in an internal training position before, it can be really hard to prove impact because there are so many different variables to whether someone takes action, increases their productivity. And so was it specifically the training that moved the needle? Was it the training fault? The needle didn't move. It's really hard to prove those things, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Preface that for anybody listening. We should still try to prove everything we can prove. But I think also knowing that when we do it well, it can have this impact, a huge motivator for us to continue to try, to continue to show up, to continue to have these conversations, because we can impact revenue, we can impact outcomes, we can improve the capabilities of teams and help them be more productive. We can improve employee engagement. And so it is just a great reminder, I think, that we have to continue to show up and measure what we can and have these conversations to show our value when we're in conversation with executives, for sure.
One of the other spaces that I think people don't take advantage of is a lot of times technology companies, for instance, the customer relationship management system that you may use, they often have a team that serves nonprofits or wants to engage with nonprofits because it serves their organization well and they genuinely want to partner with you. And what we found is that we don't know all that the technology can do. So when we're, for instance, training on technology changes that we've made or something that the company has issued out that we need to train people on, they actually have a way in the system to track who's using it, how many people are using it, who's reverted back to the old ways. And so you can track user adoption right there in the system and leverage that versus having to rely on people giving you the feedback themselves. Now, we found that's been an incredible tool that we just didn't know about all along. And it's been just a great discovery over the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm sure it's not unique to CRMs. I'm sure there are lots of tools, lots of software that are providing probably some of the same data, training, resources to help with adoption. So what do you wish learning and development teams knew about working with executives?
I would say this not only to the teams, but also to executives. Training and development are not just side projects. They are strategic levers. And if we get them right, we don't just improve in performance, we really shape the future of our organization. And I'm pretty sure most executives, that's really where their hearts and their minds are, is what is the future of the organization, in particularly mission-driven nonprofits. So really allowing those strategic levers to work for you and your mission is critical.
Great advice. And I don't know internally how much we position ourselves in L&D as that strategic lever for the future of the organization. I think we talk a lot about becoming a strategic partner, about being able to help execute on strategic goals, about building individual growth, but really thinking about where the executive sits. It's about the future. It's about sustainability. It's about the vision and making sure that we're aligning there too.
Absolutely. We have a tremendous global learning and development team, and I have a team within my group as well. With the global team, I am a champion of this, as you can tell. And I have really appreciated their partnership and how we've developed over the last several years. And then what I've also been able to give back to them is to champion what they can do for other teams. And so being able to share statistics or being able to share how we've leveraged all that they bring to the table. And so I would also encourage folks to find who's a champion, who can you implement some things with, demonstrate that it works, and then have that champion share with other executives or other leaders across the organization to exactly what you bring to the table.
That's great advice. And I know everybody's thinking, Danika, we need more champions like you, for sure, in our organizations. I so appreciate that you joined me on the podcast today to share a little bit about what you expect as an executive and just kind of give us a little snapshot, a little picture of what executives may be thinking as we're entering into conversations with them. I know this episode is going to be so valuable for people. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate the invitation and just continue to advocate for this important capability.
Thank you. As I prepared for this episode, I really wasn't sure what to expect. What do executives really want from learning and development? Do they see our value? And while I'm not sure that every executive does, I was amazed at Danika's support and appreciation for learning and development. Part of receiving that support, receiving that appreciation is showing up as the best version of ourselves. We need to invest in our own development and provide the best possible solutions to our stakeholders. And when we can do that, we create champions. If you want support in this process, I encourage you to join the nonprofit L&D Collective at the Catalyst tier. where you get not only a network of nonprofit L&D pros, but also workshops, group coaching, and other resources to support you on your journey. In fact, we have a group coaching call coming up in November around, is this a training problem? So we can be sure we're solving the right problems with the right solutions and acting as a strategic partner in our nonprofits. I'll drop the link to join in the show notes. And remember, we all need a champion like Danika. So as she recommended, find your champion and let's keep doing this important work. I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.
Hey friend, was this episode helpful for you? Did you like what you heard? Do you want more content like this? Here are 3 things you can do. Hit subscribe. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. Share this episode with a colleague. This means so much to me personally. I read every review, but it also helps me learn what content you like most so I can create more of what you want. All right, turn that Teams or Slack chat back on when you're ready, and I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.